Hello and welcome to another showdown breakdown. Arguably the most exciting, best showdown game we will have all year. It is Justin Herbert traveling to Kansas City to face Patrick Mahomes on a Thursday night island game here in week 2. Cody Main coming off of a Will Dustley flag plant, which somehow hit. I don't know how it somehow hit. Cody, how's it going?
I have an issue with the content team right now. They've clipped up the Kyle Rudolph call from last year that was absolutely laughable, and no clip for Will Dustley. What's going on here?
Mm-hmm. Yep. They don't watch this show. Gary, how's it going?
It's good, man. It's good. I'm very, very excited for this game tonight.
Yes, one of the games of the year, at least on paper. I think the big story here, Cody, is how do we handle games where everybody is so expensive because they're all such good fantasy players, and we also expect such a high scoring game. We're talking about a total of 54 and a half, maybe even 55 before kickoff. And then we also have all these guys that are very, very expensive. What does the field do? What should we be doing in these really likely high scoring games?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that jumps out to you is the salary, and it doesn't necessarily feel like any one guy is particularly overpriced. It's just that the slate as a whole is it's so hard to get the guys that you want. And once you start to, whether you're hand building or going through an opta, you start to realize like some of these guys are going to come in very, very low owned. And I expect that to start with the skill position guys up top. I think we'll get decent ownership across the board, flex and captain for some of these expensive skill position guys, because you do have Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert up top. As a whole, what we're going to see the field tend to do in these high total close games where the skill position players are so appetizing on both sides, we're going to see a lot of 3-3s, very few of those kind of extreme roster constructions that we've seen in the past with the 1-5, the 5-1s. Those are going to be very lightly utilized. So if you want to project a blowout or one side to kind of dominate the fantasy scoring, you're going to get really low ownership on those extreme roster construction styles.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. I think the point on the salary is well taken. You see these guys with these outrageous tails here, and we'll get into the specifics on some of these. Obviously, the other big story of this slate, Keenan Allen is not playing in this game. We'll get into that in a second. You see really big tails here on Mike Williams, on Justin Herbert, on Eckler, on Mahomes, on Kelsey, even on MVS to some degree. And so, yeah, we're not going to be able to fit everyone. We're going to have to figure out exactly who to fit. I think the big story here, Gary, is how to handle Keenan Allen being out. Now, there's been, we'll get to it when we get to wide receiver, but I think a lot of people are going to try to save money with Josh Palmer or DeAndre Carter. But generally speaking, what do you think about the Chargers without Keenan Allen?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I like Josh Palmer just as much as the rest of us do over here at DTR, and he's one of my most exposed guys in best ball, all that stuff. But when you look at projected ownership stuff, and I mean, for captain spot, for example, he's coming in basically the exact same as Mike Williams as a GPP guy. It's hard for me to get overly excited there. I think I'll be using plenty of Palmer in my flex. But in a vacuum, I think I prefer a little bit more flex ownership on DeAndre Carter, who's coming through with much less, on Jalen Guyton as a punt. And then certainly with Mike Williams, I think I'd be overexposed, just given that the field's going to, I think, click Palmer pretty easily.
Yeah. We see here, Cody, what you're talking about, 3-3, the most popular construction projected at 43%, only 3% of the field on 5-1, 4% on 1-5. I'm at least intrigued by those constructions. The problem is that you have to set it up in a way in which the other team, one of the teams isn't forced. So, the 5 isn't pushed. So the 5 would not be pushed as much. Certainly would want to keep the defense in there. And I think the defenses will be lightly owned on this slate tonight. Anyways, let's get into it here at the quarterback position. Everybody's going to be saying, can we play Mahomes and Herbert together? Should we be playing Mahomes and Herbert together? I mean, two of the highest floor, highest ceiling quarterbacks on a main slate. Like if this was a main slate, I'd be interested in playing both Mahomes and Herbert, even if it was a 16-game slate. Obviously, on a 1-game slate, I'm intrigued by playing both. And they're also priced in a way like Kelsey is hardly even any cheaper than the quarterback. So you get into a spot where it's like, well, yeah, I love Travis Kelsey. He's an awesome, awesome play, but is he a better play than the quarterback? So what do you think about handling them tonight, Cody?
That's the biggest takeaway, is that how highly priced the rest of the guys are around him. And I know the slate as a whole is priced up, but like 11-8 and 11-2 for Herbert, when Kelsey and Eckler are 11 and 10-2 respectively, even Big Mike being 9K, like they just didn't separate them enough. I think they should probably be closer to 12-4 and 12 or something like that. So showing up to a cash game without both of them, and hopefully we can find enough salary relief to have one of them in the captain, I think is a mistake. I think they should both be in your cash game roster construction. However, for large field tournaments, especially when you're eating up that much ownership and that much salary on two guys, and for them to get there, they're going to have to support a lot of skill position scoring as well. So the way that I'm thinking through it for tournaments, I'm most likely going to just have one of these guys because, again, if you have Kelsey, or excuse me, if you have Mahomes, he's going to be supporting at least two Chiefs skill position guys. And then similarly for Herbert, so you get into a situation where you're going to be tying up way too much salary and the roster constructions are going to be really difficult to work out. It's not something I'm certainly going to group out, but I think most of my lineups, and especially anything that's hand built, is just going to be one of these guys in large field.
Gary, I'm curious who you prefer. I mean, we have Mahomes projected 2.3 points ahead. We have Mahomes ceiling about 1.9, 1.8 points ahead. What do you think about Mahomes versus Herbert? Because in a lot of lineups, like you're only be able to, obviously you can only captain one, so there's a decision point right there. And then if you want to play just one of them, if you're playing single entry or 3 max, I think that's an interesting path to take. Who would you prefer between Herbert and Mahomes?
Yeah, it's like a give and take here, as Cody was mentioning, like especially for tournament lineups. You can get both in, but then you're punting and you're putting in chat's favorite Jody Fortson, who I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit here. So in a vacuum, I think I have a slight lean towards Mahomes, despite the fact that he's chalkier. At home, I think they just generally operate through the air as a baseline. I think a little bit more. Obviously, the Chargers have Eckler on the other side, and as much as we were happy to see CEH have a really strong game in week 1. If Eckler's able to succeed, I think they're a little bit more comfortable sticking to him, where we know Mahomes, I mean, we're coming off a 5-touchdown game. I think he's out just to dominate this season. But it's very close. I mean, both guys have a super high ceiling.
Yeah. It's tough. I was thinking about this because, if I'm going to play a cash team, I'm going to have one of them in captain. I think I'm trying to decide which one. Obviously, Herbert saves you a little bit of money. And also, like, the Herbert stacking stuff is a little bit cheaper. In other words, you get the Palmer, the DeAndre Carter, the Gerald Everett, which is a little bit cheaper than the key guys that I would want to stack on Kansas City. So, yeah, I don't know. Cody, do you have any take on Herbert versus Mahomes tonight?
Yeah, it feels like the Herbert side should be a little cleaner from a stacking perspective, but just given how evenly distributed the target share was for KC last week, but like with Allen out, I felt like I was going to have an easier time building Captain Herbert teams, but like then you get into guys like DeAndre Carter and Gerald Everett, and I think Trey McKitty down there at Stone Min is even in place. I don't know how much cleaner the stacking is on that side, even with Allen's targets removed. So, I'm certainly going to have my fair share of both of these guys at captain, and I will always be pairing them with 2 or more pass catchers, especially given the price tags. The one thing that I am worried about, as we'll kind of get into with some of the skill position guys here, is like I think captain ownership could really condense around these guys just because of how much better they project than all the other guys and how close they are in salary. So that's one thing I would keep in mind, particularly in your single entry, small field stuff. Like I think the captain ownership here is going to get a little bit outsized in those contests.
Okay. Well,
Cody, do you think like Kelsey or Eckler here at the top could fall through the cracks? I mean, we'll talk about them at there just because, I mean, the pricing's so high on them. Everyone's going to have to stack up with the 2 quarterbacks. It just seems like they could fall through the cracks in large field.
Definitely. Like the price tags on these guys are just so close to the other guys that I think that we will get some skill position guys, and there's so many of them that a couple of them are going to come with surprisingly low ownership.
Yeah, somebody here is going to come in under owned for what their upside is in this game just because of price alone.
Okay, let's go to running back. I want to be very clear about what happened last week with the Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco was not even in the rotation basically for the first 3 quarters. I believe he had 2 touches in the first 3 quarters. They get up 37-7. Isaiah Pacheco comes in and looks great. In the first half, the touches were CEH 10, Pacheco 2, Jerick McKinnon 4. And then after that, things just kind of got away from the Cardinals and they put Pacheco in and Pacheco played well. I get that maybe people think he earned a bigger role. We are not projecting that. I don't see that as really a thing. I would not be playing Pacheco at 4,400. I actually think that he might get some ownership because everybody has a boner for Pacheco. I mean, it's crazy. Everywhere I go, people can't stop talking about Isaiah Pacheco. So I want to be very clear there. I think CEH is an awesome play. If that game had not blown out, I mean, CEH would have had an absolutely massive game. And so he's a little bit overpriced, I think, at 8,600, but I think that he could come in pretty low owned here. We have 31%, 20% captain. I could see less than that just because people who are looking at the box score are just going to be like, oh, CEH got out carried by Isaiah Pacheco, and they're just like not paying attention to what actually happened. And also I would add that the Chargers play this defensive style, or at least they did last year, where they kind of dare teams to run on them. And they're very sharp, and they're like, listen, we know running is the more inefficient play call, and so we're going to dare you to run on us. And teams had a ton of success last year running on the Chargers. And so Chiefs have one of the best offensive lines in the league. I like CEH a lot here. McKinnon is going to be a really, really popular punt as well. So Cody, go ahead on the Chiefs backfield.
Yeah, love your call on CEH. That was kind of my first takeaway when going through and building teams. Like, CEH is going to be a tough guy to want to click in on a hand build, and he's going to be a tough guy for optimizers to force in at 8,600. Again, Big Mike, $400 more expensive right there, is going to project probably better across the industry. And then you've got guys that are way cheaper. And then McKinnon's one of those guys that makes roster constructions work. 7.8 mean projection at $2,600 is a guy that's going to be forced into a ton of lineups, I think, maybe even more so than the 19.3% ownership that we're projecting. So I think this is like the first spot where I really feel like ownership could fall through on this guy, and he could get squeezed out, and 31% total ownership might be high, and 5.2% captain ownership might be high. So I think CEH is great leverage off of like the game script that people are going to be building for, and great leverage off of his own, backfield mate who is way cheaper, who I think is going to get plenty of ownership too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously McKinnon is going to be the third down back. And for those guys who haven't been following, that's McKinnon's role. He's going to play on pass downs. If the Chiefs were to get behind in this game, I think McKinnon would play a lot. Pacheco is a special teamer in the backup to CEH, in my opinion. On the other side, Gary, I get that Eckler's game was not all that strong, and it was a bit scary. He only played 49% of the snaps in week 1. And I think it's true what he said all offseason. I want to take reps off me. I want my career to be longer and touch the ball less in each game. They went out and they got Sony Michel. They drafted Isaiah Spiller. He's been a healthy scratch. Josh Kelly, I thought, played a pretty good game in week 1. The narrative is that they took it easy on him, even though he did touch the ball 18 times in week 1. He only played 49% of the snaps because it was a short week. There's a huge game against Kansas City. They had to rest him, and now they're going to come out and absolutely unleash Austin Eckler. I can buy that narrative. I think that's possible, but he's also 10,200. We're not getting any kind of discounts. So what do you think about the Chargers backfield here, Gary?
Yeah, and I get that the Raiders came back there at the end. The score looked a little bit closer than it was, but the Chargers had that game in hand for a lot of it. So I think that they were taking a little bit easy on their star running back going into this game on the short week. As you said, I could buy into that narrative. I love Eckler. I think I talk a lot about how I don't think about price that much. I just want the best ceiling plays. And if they fit in the correct way, they'll fit in the correct way. And, Eckler could easily be that guy tonight. I would imagine we're going to see a lot more than 49%. Then again, it's a long season. The guy gets banged up a lot. They use him on all their high leverage spots. They need him to be a successupsable team. So if they're going to ease him into this season, it's a possibility. Maybe this would get 55% when we'd prefer to be seeing over 60. But the upside's really, really high. The guy can catch 5 balls with his eyes closed and fall into the end zone twice. And even at 10-2, that's what you need. So I have no problem with it. You got to throw in the Kellys of the world into your pool. But I always hate that second Chargers backup spot. It's hard to pick on.
Yeah, I do think that RB backup running backs are profitable in the large field. Like, I think that the field, and Cody probably knows better than me, but I think the field underplays the backup running backs relative to how often they finish in the top 1%. If I was picking one between Kelly and Sony, I actually think I would pick Kelly to save the money because I thought their usage was almost identical. And I actually think Kelly played a little bit better than Sony. And so 1,600, I would save the money there. It looks like we're projecting a little bit more than 4% more ownership on Kelly versus Sony. But yeah, I agree with everything Gary said about Eckler. I would not be worried about the week 1 usage. The way he scores fantasy points is so perfect. For full PPR and yeah, I think that was a great play. He's just expensive. Cody, any more thoughts here on Chargers backfield?
Yeah, just one take on Sony. Sony's probably the so bad he's good play of the day because he is $1,400 more expensive than Josh Kelly in a 3-man backfield. Like, no one's going to go there. If he just happens to be the guy that falls in the end zone, you're probably doing backflips. So 7.1% ownership might even be just a shade high. He could be the one guy that helps differentiate your lineup. So he'll make my pool just as a way to get unique.
Okay.
Yeah. I just want to say, I think McKinnon's good chalk. The price, just when you look at Slate, and I was hand building a little bit too, he needs just a couple catches really to pay off that tag. And so if you're playing this as 3-3s or 4-2s and you think this game goes close, or if you want to try to even play a 5-1 Chargers type thing and get really unique, he makes so much sense in all of those. If you're thinking this game goes over 54, McKinnon makes sense in so many different constructions. So I like it personally.
Yeah. The best ball bags need a big McKinnon game here too.
Yeah,
okay.
too.
Wide receiver. I mean, it's absolutely stacked because the Keenan stuff makes it so that even more guys are appealing. So we have Mike Williams projected for the most. Now, Mike Williams' role in week 1, and I talked about this in the preseason. They used him in that X role beginning of last year. They did not continue to use him in that role, and that's where his production kind of fell off. I wasn't encouraged by the way they used him in week 1, but with Keenan out, I think he should get more easy chances, more layup chances. Now, there's also controversy how they're going to use DeAndre Carter and Josh Palmer. Last week when Keenan went out, DeAndre Carter played in a lot of 2 wide receiver sets. I don't expect that to be the case tonight. I think with a week to prepare, it's going to be Josh Palmer and Mike Williams in 2 wide receiver sets. Then they'll go 3 wide and bring DeAndre Carter into the slot. Clearly, DeAndre Carter can play. You're only saving $400 though off of Palmer. I prefer Palmer. I think as we have here, the field prefers Palmer by like 14%, but I wouldn't discount Carter outscoring Palmer whatsoever in this game. We also have the Guyton wind sprints flyer. I'm not too interested in that, but certainly if I was MME burrowing 150, I'd be interested in that. But yeah, what do you think about the Chargers wide receivers? And also let's bring Gerald Everett into the mix here and your boy McKitty. We can talk about tight ends at the same time. Go ahead, Cody.
Yeah, obviously off the top, love Big Mike. Big Mike was a guy that I chased a ton last year at captain. His archetype just kind of fits the profile of somebody that you want to target when they're going to be low owned. And the 9K price tag is relatively nice. Hopefully the box score dud from last week will help keep ownership in check, though I'm not really banking on that. But I think 6.9% captain ownership on a 9K Mike Williams, a guy that could truly has that 10, 102 upside. Big body frame that can convert in the red zone. I like banking on those type of guys. And if he happens to be the guy, I want to be in on that. The Palmer DeAndre Carter stuff is interesting because they did aggressively price up DeAndre Carter, obviously with Keenan being out, but they didn't really move Josh Palmer's price tag. And maybe that's right, but it makes Palmer a really good value because we do expect him to play more. We expect the target share to be higher, but there's some uncertainty there. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that ownership gap be even a little bit wider come lock. So I'm kind of in on DeAndre Carter as a pivot. I think the dude can play a little bit. And if he ends up taking a lot of those slot snaps where Allen was playing, I think that's a place where Justin Herbert just likes to target. And I think you could easily see him outscore Josh Palmer at an ownership discount.
Yeah, I think that's interesting for sure. I'll throw in Gerald Everett, and Gerald Everett played roughly 2/3 of the snaps in week 1, ran around on him, roughly 2/3 of Justin Herbert's dropbacks, caught the touchdown pass. I think the game environment here and Keenan Allen out is just so good for Gerald Everett. Like we have a decision in one of those season-long leagues that we did. We have Dawson Knox and Gerald Everett. I think I prefer Gerald Everett here for likeliest game flow and Keenan Allen being out. I know people are going to be on Trey McKitty, though, because Trey McKitty saw 4 targets last week and he's 400. And so if you're willing to play Trey McKitty, which I don't know if I am or not, but if you're willing to play Trey McKitty at 400, Gary, you can do a lot of things. I don't think 4 targets is too likely going forward. He was kind of a blocker, kind of tagged as a blocker to some degree, but he's a super athletic dude. They used a bunch of draft capital on him. So I get it. And Donald Parham is out, by the way, still injured. So what do you think about using Trey McKitty here, Gary?
Yeah, so for Chargers tight ends, I just prefer Everett, and I'm not playing both of them really. So Everett's 4,800. He works so well in Herbert doubles. McKitty's fine as your punt, but I think I prefer Fortson on the other side, just as like a cross my fingers and get 2 touchdowns type of thing, and just play as much Everett as I can, because I think the numbers and the target share, snap share was really good for Everett, and there's with Parham out, there's really no competition there. So McKitty's fine as a punt, but I think I prefer Fortson.
Okay. Cody, I feel like you're dying to say something about Trey McKitty.
I think we're light on his projection. I kind of buy the snap share. I kind of buy the targets that he ran last week. I don't necessarily, or buy the routes that he ran last week. I don't necessarily buy the targets being there week in and week out. But $400 and the fact that we have a low projection on him, I think is going to kind of help keep ownership in check, which I'm okay with. But I will definitely be forcing more than the field. It looks like we have 0%, so there must be some sort of naming issue there. We'll get that fixed. But I will be forcing in some Trey McKitty and my Justin Herbert stuff.
Okay. Yeah. And go ahead, Gary.
No, so Mike Williams crushed the Chiefs last year. On in the week 3 game, he had 7, 122, and 2. He had 18 targets in the 2 games combined. Keenan Allen was active in both of those. He also was one of those guys that coming off a down week would have a big week often last year. Mike Williams is just in a smash spot, I think, tonight.
Okay. Let's go to the Chiefs side. Travis Kelce is obviously an awesome play. If that game had stayed close last week, he may have had 200 yards. I mean, he was just absolutely shredding. This is a much, 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 much tougher matchup for Travis Kelce in the pass game. I mean, the Cardinals secondary might be one of the worst in the league. I think that even with the injuries that the Chargers have on defense, this is still one of the better, at least more talented defenses in the entire league. So a way, way, way tougher matchup. And you get Kelce priced up near the quarterback. So I think to a point what Gary was saying before, it's like, man, you get up towards who am I going to play captain? Well, yeah, I want to play Kelce, but can I really stomach it over the quarterbacks? And maybe you get a little bit of a discount on Kelce captain ownership here tonight. I also think Juju Smith-Schuster is underpriced for his role. He fumbled twice last week. They didn't throw much in the second half, but he was on his way to a monster game. And to me, it's not close between MVS and Mecole. I mean, I think Mecole, MVS is better player with a more solid role. And I certainly prefer MVS there. So, and everybody wants to talk about Noah Gray and Jody Fortson. After Cody hit Will Dustley, now all anybody wants to talk about is these dust ball tight ends. But Cody, go ahead on Chiefs pass catchers.
Yeah, the Travis Kelce point is so interesting because I think the more casual builder will want to throw him in there, and especially off of last week's performance, especially the name value, especially Tyreek being gone. But like if you're using an optimizer and you're using anyone's projections, you're not going to get a ton of Travis Kelce. Trust me, I was trying before the show, and you're just not getting a lot of Travis Kelce because of how close he is to Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes. And I think for that reason, like that's a great reason to force more of him in. 9.2% captain ownership. I would be slightly surprised if it came in higher than that, but wouldn't be surprised if it came in a little bit lower. So I think we can get a little bit of a discount there with the $11,000 price tag. Certainly pairing him with Mahomes, I think if I have Travis Kelce at captain. The point on Mecole Hardman is interesting to me because I think the field is going to have that opinion too. And we have ownership kind of flipped there between MVS and Mecole Hardman. I think MVS is a better player, but Mecole's role was interesting to say the least last week. He was definitely used as the lid lifter, if you will. Got 2 deep targets, 20 plus yards downfield, plus 4 targets, closer to the line of scrimmage. So the role was interesting. I don't know if they'll continue to use him that way going forward, but he's priced so close to MVS that we might actually end up getting a little bit of a discount there. So interested to see if maybe that ownership comes down throughout the day and we can maybe get a little bit of a discount on him. I will touch quickly on Gray and Fortson before I kick it back to you guys. Just looking at some of the stuff around the industry today, and I think Hayden Winks from Underdog had this, that Patrick Mahomes had 11 dropbacks with 2 tight ends on the field, or 2 or more tight ends on the field. So I thought that was interesting. Maybe it's just a nod to Andy Reid getting a little bit more creative with Tyreek gone. I think both of those guys profile as flyers you can use, throughout your Mahomes builds. Just don't expect the Dustley thing again. That was such a unique situation where he was actually the tight end 1 for that team, and then of course gets the first touchdown. But I certainly have interest in having Noah Gray and Jody Fortson in my player pool tonight.
Gary, it sounded like you had a little bit of excitement in your pants for Jody Fortson. Do you want to expand?
Yeah, I mean, how can you not? I think he pops through the PSM like crazy. Guy's a former basketball player. We love that with tight ends. He's athletic freak. I was trying to get Cody and Ryan to draft him in the 18th round of our FFPC draft where we have Patrick Mahomes, even though we didn't need to do that because he's just sitting on the wire. But I love Jody Fortson. I'm just bullish on him.
Is he related? Is he related to Danny Fortson?
I do not know.
Okay. You remember Danny Fortson, the basketball player, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. One of my favorite parts of these shows when Adam asks, is someone related to X person? It's always one of the better segments.
When you get old enough, you remember their fathers and everything. Okay. By the way, on Sky Moore, I know everybody's excited about Sky Moore. Sky Moore only ran 7 routes last week, even in a blowout situation. He could play more this week if the game is close, but it's kind of hard to see it. And I think people are still kind of excited about him. So it would be super thin to play, super thin to play Sky Moore. Like we were thinking about like betting his under on receiving yards, and it's like nothing. It's like 11.5 yards. So we're not even sure how much he's going to play in this game. Okay.
Yeah, Sky Moore is like a guy, like a stash for me that just, I think at some point this season he's going to have value, but it's not now.
Okay.
I mean, in Showdown, you could throw him in your pool, but I wouldn't expect much.
Defense and kicker, Cody. I mean, we do have to make the point here, and we're going to get Matt Amendola into the pool here. Harrison Butker hurt I believe it was his ankle or something in week 1. He's not kicking tonight. It will be Matt Amendola. Matt Amendola is in the pool. I repeat, Matt Amendola is in the pool. I believe he's 4K or 3,600 or something like that. Obviously, defenses in a matchup like this are almost never owned very much. Cody, what do you think about playing defenses in shootouts, which I actually think is kind of on main slate at least is kind of sneaky and contrarian and can work. I'm not sure about Showdown. And then what do you think about playing kickers here?
Yeah, I love that point on DSTs. When we know both offenses are going to drop back and there's going to be opportunities for points to be scored, you're really just hoping for kind of that outlier outcome where one of them gets a pick 6 or something along those lines. I do think ownership might be propped up a little bit because as we've talked through the show, like just a lack of cheap skill position players available. These defenses are 3,200 and 3,600 respectively. They don't project for much ownership, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them come in a little bit higher. Don't really set any rules around my DST. I do try to limit the number of opposing players I have against them, but again, I'm not banking on them limiting points. I'm kind of just hoping to get that outcome where there's quite a few sacks and potentials for a scoop and score or pick 6. So I do have interest in both, and certainly in your 4-2s, 5-1s, and vice versa, like including the DST from those teams that you're heavy on in those builds is super sharp.
Okay.
Yeah. So something I do in regular main slates, right? So like if I'm including a quarterback in my main stack, right, I'm always going to want to make sure I have enough exposure to that team's defense as well. Just obviously in lineups that I'm not using that team's main stack. So for example, if I'm using a lot of Mahomes doubles in the lineups that I don't have Mahomes doubles, I do want to make sure I have a good amount of Chiefs defense exposure, right? If this game is getting there in some specific way, but it's not happening through that, there's a very good chance it's going to happen through the defense. This kind of game's a perfect example of that. I'd certainly want to do that. So obviously in Showdown, you don't want to make too many rules where you're ruling this kind of thing out, but I would specifically try to get like Chiefs defense in my non-Mahomes doubles, Chargers defense in my non-Herbert doubles.
Okay. Yeah. And this Matt Amendola kid, by the way, he kicked for, I believe, the Jets, and he was the only kicker to kick in practice, I believe, for this week for the Chiefs. So I think he'll be ready to kick. He's not as good as Harrison Butker. I don't think he probably doesn't have the same amount of range, but yeah, he's at least in play. Okay. We have some time here. We take about 3 to 5 minutes of questions before we flag the plants. Oh, Cody, any FanDuel specific stuff that we should know at all for this slate?
Yeah, I was just looking at the differences in pricing and who is popping as values. No surprise, Mahomes and Herbert look equally underpriced over there relative to the rest of the field. Josh Palmer, of course, still pops as a good value. Was interested to see Mecole kind of pop as a decent value, but priced down at 7,500. I mean, he's only $1,000 more expensive than McKinnon over there. So I like Mecole, and especially if he's going to continue to get those deep targets where you're really hoping for touchdowns on FanDuel, touchdowns and yardage over there where receptions are worth less. I like Mecole Hardman over on FanDuel as well. I was looking for some guys that might be a little bit overpriced that will then come with even less ownership. Looks like Josh Kelly is a little bit overpriced over there as well. Gerald Everett kind of to the same degree. So those guys, while they're decent values on DraftKings and will thus come with ownership, they're going to be more expensive on FanDuel and come with less ownership. So thinking through that in large field tournaments makes sense.
Den says it's way too early for him to be this bricked up. Does that mean he's aroused? Is that young person speak for aroused?
I think that's what the kids are saying these days.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
Right.
Kellen says when you get to Kelsey and you talk about what ETR projects for his receptions under 7.5. Yes, we took Kelsey under 7.5 receptions. We project 6.6. I do not want this to bleed into DFS analysis. It is very, very, very different. The distribution and the way that Travis Kelsey kind of distributes his catches is way different than what we're thinking about here with Showdown, which is ceiling, which is floor and all that. And Travis Kelsey is obviously one of the best players on the slate. Just because we have under 7.5 in props does not mean that we don't like Travis Kelsey as a play here.
7.5 is a really high number for a medium projection. Really, really high.
There's a lot of people who are bricked up for Fortson in here.
Yeah, that gets me scared. But I mean, he's like Donald Parham-esque in the PSM. Man, look at this guy's athletically 6'4", 227. I think he's a monster.
Okay. OG Mansfan 69 says, what are the chances a kicker lands the optimal, and will Andy be less likely to kick with a backup kicker? Now that's an interesting thing. Is he less comfortable with Matt Amendola than he is with Harrison Butker? And therefore, if it's 4th and 4 from the 35 or something, he's like, Mahomes, get back out there, right? So I could see that. Maybe. I think it's an interesting thought. Either of you guys have any narratives on what they'll do with Matt Amendola?
I was actually going to ask you guys the same thing for a football guy take / rational coaching take, because I think that, I mean, it should at least play into the calculus somewhat. I don't know how you really quantify it, but yeah, I mean, maybe you dock Amendola's projection a little bit in your own runs. But I also think the fact that it's not Harrison Butker in name value will also bring down his ownership as well. So it's kind of a play both sides of the coin type of thing.
Joseph wants to know if doing a 5-1 would Captain Mike Williams be viable? I assume he means 5 Chiefs and one Charger. Would you play Mike Williams in your captain if you were doing that construction?
So I've talked about this a ton, and trust me, like any construction in Showdown can work. Any weird type of process can work. But I think in thinking through this intuitively, and historically it has not worked. Historically, if you have a 5-1, you want your captain to be from the 5 side. But intuitively thinking through it last night, if Mike Williams gets there and beats all of the Chiefs guys, most likely someone else from that Chargers offense has to come along with him. Probably Justin Herbert, but like if he's doing enough to be optimal, you're probably assuming that the Chargers are moving the ball and scoring points. And in those instances, you're more likely to get like a 4-2 build where another Charger is optimal.
Yep. Cody just answered that question for you, Anthony, right there. Let's see here. Leo says, do you prioritize ceiling when picking your captains? For sure. I mean, you need an outside score at captain. If you can read Cody's how to beat large field showdown stuff, he talks a lot about the captain stuff like that. There's a correlation between QB and opposing D if looking for that outlier. DST, I think what Jay is asking is if I'm playing Mahomes, can I play Chargers defense? It doesn't strike me as a good play, but maybe it's weird enough to be good on Showdown. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly noisy because no one's really doing it, but actually top 1% lineups do it more than the field does. The field is it's probably like the one rule that most people that are using optimizers are just setting right off the bat. So it rarely happens, and it's happened enough in top 1% lineups that it's positive leverage there.
I actually think in a matchup like this, it kind of makes a little bit of sense, like a high over under. You know, if you're thinking about, like, say Mahomes going to throw the ball 45 times, you know, there could be 1 pick 6 in there, and he could still be, you know, doing plenty on the other end. So I don't hate it.
Quentin wants everyone to know that he doesn't know if it's the weed talking, but he's thinking about fading CEH, Mike Williams heavy captain. I don't know if it's the weed either, but you're not gonna be able to play everyone on this slate.
Yeah.
Like you're not gonna be able to play the quarterbacks and Kelsey and CEH and Mike Williams. Like you're just not. And so I would not worry about the weed so much, but I would not worry about not having one of these guys in your lineups.
Cody, we've got guys smoking weed, guys bricked up. It's not even noon yet.
Some negative correlation stuff I was thinking about. I'm curious if you agree. And I know you touched on some of it in your article, but like Hardman with some of the Chiefs receivers, I think makes sense for negative correlation. Like he's their deep threat, you know, especially MVS makes sense. And then like Palmer, Carter, Guyton, negative correlation. Does that make sense to you?
So I think Palmer and Carter are cheap enough that they could both get there, and they work in opposite enough roles, especially if we expect the Chargers to be in 3 wide receiver sets, that I probably wouldn't negatively correlate that one, but I would negatively correlate the other receivers, those 2 secondary receivers in lineups that have Guyton, because I guess if Guyton gets there, he's probably taking more routes from Carter and Palmer, which wouldn't be expected. So
that makes sense. And then the other thing I was thinking, definitely, like I would make a rule personally of max 1 of anyone like under 1,200. Like I'm not having 2 punts on this slate. There's too many amazing plays. Like it's a fantasy like wonderland, you know.
I think optimizers could try and force that, just given the salaries up top and the projections up top. I think salaries or optimizers could try and force those really cheap punts into those,
right? Because like which makes sense if you're trying to get 2 quarterbacks in, like you can easily end up with 2 punts often. So like under the McKinnon range, I think I would max 1. Yeah, personally.
Biz brings up a good point. Is Matt Amendola related to Danny Amendola? I don't know.
Different spelling.
I don't know. Different spelling. Good choice.
Yeah, two M's in the kicker, I believe.
Steven says, who would be the safest cash captain on DraftKings? I think one of the quarterbacks. I mean, you know, if I'm playing cash, I'm playing either Mahomes or Herbert. I was playing around with some teams, and the salary does make a difference. So, you know, I was looking at some Herbert captain teams for sure. In cash on FanDuel, would you play both quarterbacks? I think it's hard to get away from that. It's obviously very expensive. I haven't tried to make a team on FanDuel yet, though. Either of you guys have a take on playing both quarterbacks in cash on FanDuel?
I haven't made a FanDuel cash team yet, but I actually think it's probably easier on FanDuel because they don't have the 1.5x multiplier for the MVP spot on the salary. So yes, I think you need both quarterbacks in cash on FanDuel.
Some more bets that we like. We were close to taking the McCall Hardman under 3.5. I think it was like minus 115. It's not great. We decided to pass. Yeah, maybe a CEH over in carries. If you can find something good up that line, starting to get away from us too. And so, yeah, I mean, openers are moving fast these days in props, guys. So just be aware of that. Everybody's betting the openers. Eckler captain in a 1-5. I think that might be even worse than Mike Williams because, like, if they're getting, ransacked, in other words, by the Chiefs, like, you're not going to get a lot of Eckler carries. And so, as Cody said, if Eckler's getting a lot of catches, he's going to bring along Herbert with him, and Herbert has a pretty good chance to end up in the optimal. And so, yeah, I don't really like Eckler captain in 1-5, but I don't know. What do you think about that, Cody?
Yeah, I think agree with you that it's even worse than Mike Williams. Again, yeah. If Eckler's going to get there, somebody else is likely going to get there from the Chargers offense too.
If you think the game's going to be really low scoring, I think if you're playing the lotto, it's worth thinking through things like this. If you think the game ends up being really low scoring, who's the best play? And like, I don't know, man. It's like CEH or, not one of the quarterbacks, if it's really low scoring. Will you separate out, Gary, some builds that go under the assumption that the game is like 24-20 or something like that?
Yeah, and I'd probably be putting at least one kicker in most of those lineups. I think in that case. Yeah, I mean, the best play in a really low scoring game, it's tough. Like, you have to basically bring down the entire slate at that point. So, like, you're still adjusting for, like, it doesn't mean that Mahomes or Herbert can't get there. I'm probably not playing both quarterbacks in those types of positions though, because you're not anticipating the full on shootout. But I guess you can give a little bit more love to, like, between the tackles, running backs in those scenarios as well. But I guess it's just kind of like the big home run hitters that I'm not taking as much. I'd probably be a little bit less Mecole Hardman, a little bit less MVS in those types of builds.
Yeah. Alex asked about MVS captain. There's so many good, solid to great plays on this slate. I don't think I'm too interested in MVS captain, who will need like some kind of like weird bomb play to work out for him to be the optimal captain. But it's showdown. It's one game. There's a ton of variance. I wouldn't crush anyone for using MVS as captain, but I not one of my favorites. I don't know. What do you think about MVS captain tonight, Cody?
Yeah, the interesting thing with the Chiefs pass catchers is obviously there was so much certainty in how things were going to work last season with Tyreek Hill being the one and Kelsey kind of working as the number two, with so much uncertainty. And especially after a blowout in week one, we still really don't have any certainty in this situation. Like, if you think MVS is the wide receiver one and you think he's going to lead this group in targets throughout the rest of the year, and you think he's the wide receiver one over Juju, then yeah, 6,400. And he does have the type of ceiling that could separate or come close enough to the other guys that he gets there. So I wouldn't rule it out. I don't know if I'm crazy about it, but yeah, if you've got a lean that you think he's closer to the wide receiver one than we do, then go for it.
It's worth noting JC Jackson game time decision for the Chargers that changes things, I think, a little bit for the Chiefs receivers. I'm bullish on all of these guys a little bit tonight. I love Juju though. If this game stays close.
Okay. All right. Let's get to the portion of the program everybody's been waiting for. The flagging of the plants, the planting of the flags. Cody hit the nuts last time we did this with the Will Dustley, so I'll give him honors, much like in golf. If you make a birdie, you get to go first in the next hole. Go ahead, Cody.
There's no clear slam dunk on this slate like we had with Will Dustley, but there's another guy that we kind of thought was pretty dusty coming into the season, and I think the role is going to be awesome for this guy starting here in week 2 with a close game. And we know how much the field underplays running backs in high total games. CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, is a guy that I think is going to go under-owned at 8,600 with all of those awesome pass catchers priced around him, with the quarterbacks up there at 11K. I think CEH's captain ownership could come in closer to 3 or 4%. And if the Chiefs do cover this 4-point spread, I think CEH is a guy that they want to lean on, and a guy that does have 2 touchdown upside as the de facto bell cow in this offense. So I think CEH is the optimal captain tonight.
Yep. Love it. Love it. Love it. Gary, go ahead.
Man, I have a hard time like picking someone really contrarian on this type of slate. Like at this slate, like I'm joking about how much I love Fortune, but you can't ever really flag someone unlike this. Like, you can make a real argument for most of these main skill position guys. I'm going to go Mike Williams just because I think the 7% around captain ownership that we have is low for what his upside is here tonight. I mean, he's a very, very, very clear wide receiver target number one for the Chargers here. I think he's peppered with targets, and I'd like this game to stay close. So I think he should be, closer to Austin Eckler's captain percentage, Travis Kelce's captain percentage. So for the flex spot, I don't mind being around the field. For captain, I'd be forcing to be over. So I'll go Mike Williams.
Yes, I like it. I was going to say CEH, but since Cody stole it from me, and well-deserved stole it from me because he had the honors from the Will Dustley call, I will pivot to someone else. And, the trend of tight end smashing on showdown slates continued with Will Dustley. I also think that this guy is going to be under-owned because of how close he's priced to the quarterbacks. And so I will go with Travis Kelce, who is only 200 less than Justin Herbert and only 800 less than Patrick Mahomes. In a vacuum, Travis Kelce is not a good play. As Cody said, all the opto bros, all the bros like Gary just ramming it in there with 150, they're not going to get a lot of Travis Kelce here. And so if we can put on our hard hats and crack our knuckles and get our hands in the dirt and make some hand builds that accentuate Travis Kelce here, I think that's good leverage on a slate where I think it's going to be pretty efficient in terms of ownership outside of that. So yeah, I think Travis Kelce, optimal captain tonight. Obviously in Kelce captain teams, I would have Patrick Mahomes. Cody, would you have any other pass catcher? Let's say you had Kelce captain and Mahomes. Do you use more Chiefs pass catchers beyond that?
I would be max one. Given their relative price tags, they're all kind of priced similarly. I would be max one if I have Kelce captain.
Yes. Chris notes that he wishes Parham was playing. Buddy, if Parham was playing, you know what the flag plan would have been, okay? So, can't flag plan on a guy who isn't even going to be out there tonight. All right. That's going to do it. Enjoy the game tonight. Should be a very, very, very good and fun game. For Cody, for Gary, for producer Adam, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.